This is an amazing story because he came from nothing and was on top of the financial world. I mean, he was worth billions.
Bernard Evers, CEO of WorldCom, rises from rags to riches and then falls from the pinstripe to prison stripes. Let's see how this began.
In 1983, long-distance discount service was established by Murray Waldron and William Rector. The company was formed due to the breakup of the AT&T that enables the competitors to resell the long-distance telephone service to individual and business customers. Bernard Evers later was assigned as the CEO, where the current debt of the company was 1.5 million. By having a capabilities of nationwide network, WorldCom later merged with MCI Communication Corp, Brooks Fiber Properties and CompuServe Corp in November 1997, which was the largest mergers of the corporate history that cost amounted to 42.5 billion. In the year of 1999, WorldCom experienced falling in the stock price by 14% and decrease in revenue growth. In order to make the company look more profitable, the company represent the operating cost as the capital expenditure, where the WorldCom reduced and moved the reserve money by 2.8 billion into its revenue in its financial statement. In July 2020, 129 billion worth acquisition of Sprint Communication was blocked by the European and US regulators, which caused the company are unable to generate revenue and face higher debt. The acquisition towards the intermediate communication also went wrong when the Antitrust Division of US Department of Justice ordered WorldCom to sell its asset. In 11 March 2002, the US Security and Exchange Commission requested information relating to accounting procedure and loans to officers from WorldCom, as the company support of more than 400 million of personal loans at a charitable interest rate of 2.15%. Evers was asked to resign from the company on April 30. Upon his resignation, the company's stock dropped to 1.75 as compared to 64.5 during 1999 with the company debt of 28 billion. Next is the issue of the case study. WorldCom has become a byword for accounting fraud, as analysts and brokers begin to discover WorldCom values and make strong recommendations to investors to make their stock desirable. Hence, when the tech company was booming, they continued to splash spending on acquiring additional companies. By then, investors become suspicious, especially after the Enron scandal back in 2001. The main elements of WorldCom issue here as to hide its falling profitability. They inflated net income and recorded their cash flow expenses as investment and recorded billions profit instead of net loss. It was clearly fraudulent accounting reporting. It does not help the situation any better when the company becomes a sweetheart loan to their executive. At one point, even their personal asset was insufficient to finance those expenses. Their policy of authorizing for board directors and executives were integrating whether such loan policy were ever ethical as it concerned conflict of interest and breach of fiduciary duties. Things become more interesting whereby auditors and analysts were active participants in the games of nods and winks. It came to no surprise as it was Arthur Andersen that endorsed many of the accounting irregularities that contribute to WorldCom demise. Later, the investor community became ambivalent about the relationship. Cynthia Cooper, the internal auditor at the WorldCom, carefully exposed some of the accounting irregularities that intended to deceive the investor. The team became suspicious by the number of peculiar financial transactions and went outside responsibility to investigate. Rather, they found the series of clever manipulation intended to cover losses even though they had been warned. They found evidence that fraud was committed. The discussion question for WorldCom is, what is the role of the board of directors over any action that has been taken out of good faith in the company affair? Should accountability be a core part of a company culture and core value? To what extent is it considered as conflict of interest in the company's matters? What is the importance of integrity and ethics in the context of corporate governance? Next, we move on to the objective of the case study, is to associate fiduciary duties of the board of directors in regards of the company affair. The second objective is to discern the function of accountability in the company's culture and the core values toward its stakeholders. The third objective is to identify the degree of conflict of interest in the company and how it impacts the organization as a whole. The fourth objective is to determine the importance of practicing integrity and ethics on matters of company relation.
For the first literature review is Fiduciary Duties and Role of the Board from Nicola J. Price in 2019. The board structure as well as its authorities, duties and responsibility must be adequately and clearly defined. The board have many duties and responsibility in every decision the board makes. they must consider how it will affect to their shareholder and also stakeholder. For the second one is Anand Raja K in 2004. He placed under a duty to ensure that any act he undertakes is with a view to enhancing the interest of the company, either by increase of profit, reduce cost or positively publicity for the company. According to the Companies Act in 2016, for a proper purpose and in a good faith in the best interest of the company, the board as fiduciary duties are subject to act bona fide in the interest of the company and must not exercise their power for any collateral purpose. For the last one is Chatterbridge Corp Limited v. Lelot Bank and Arnold in 1970. It stated that whether as an intelligent and honest man in the position of a director of the company, the director reasonably believed that the transactions were for the benefit of the company. It is the test whether the particular director has a breach fiduciary duties as regard a transaction. Applying the literature review into the case, through the general stock options and purchase, Abbas used his existing holding as collateral to finance the purchase of stock options. But this method used by him faced an issue when the value of stock declined and needed to cover the outstanding loans by putting more collateral. The problem arises when his personal assets are insufficient to cover the call and left him with two options, whether to sell the common share or to request a loan from the company to cover the margin call. Selling the share is not an option for Abbas when the board refused due to the ground that the action taken will depress the stock price and sign a lack of confidence about WorldCom's future. However, had he pressed the matters and sold his stock, he would have escaped the bankruptcy financially. And then the policy applied by the board of directors of WorldCom make people wonder and disapprove the action as they authorize loan for Abbas, which become the largest amount of loan in publicly traded company. In WorldCom, the board of directors are acting in contrast from their duties and roles as they granted the loan for the officers of the company to finance its purchase for the stock of the company. And then these actions should be avoided by the directors as it is in contrast with the fiduciary duties which will affect the growth of the company. For the second literature review is accountability. From Cadbury Report in 1992, making accountability work is the responsibility of both parties. Accountability refers to whether a company and its director are answerable for consequence of their actions. Board have responsibility to develop and monitor a strong internal control to ensure that management has been effectively implemented. From R. Morgan in 2000, collectively describe individual and position accountability as the primary means of defining who is accountability and for whose actions. Role accountability refer to the individual's responsibility for the things that are included in their role, even though those in their own company are responsible for what was happened. Apart from that, accountability and transparency are an essential part of ethical business practice. So from Cadbury Report in 1992, transparency means open and clear disclosure of relevant information to shareholder and other stakeholders, also not concealing information when it may affect decisions. Disclosure matters concerning the organization performance and activities should be timely and accurate to ensure that all investors have access to clear information. From Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002, clarify and make publicly known the roles and responsibility of board and management to provide stakeholders with a level of accountability. It ensures that managers make the most efficient use of company's resources without improper regard for personal interests. Applying the literature review into the case study, in regard of financial reporting, WorldCom used a liberal view of accounting rules when preparing a financial statement, with an effort to present that profit of the company were increasing. Therefore, all the accounting practice used by WorldCom was put in peril as the government prohibited the company from acquiring Spring. And then the consequences of the failure to acquire Spring affected the WorldCom's acquisitions without consolidation strategy, which made the company stuck between two options, whether to choose between finding other ways to sustain and increase the share price, or focusing to utilize the previous acquisitions by creating value with the possible losses of share value. In July 2002, WorldCom filed for bankruptcy after several disclosures regarding accounting irregularities. It was credited by WorldCom was improper accounting for operating expenses as capital expenses, which violate the generally accepted accounting practice. As related to the case study, WorldCom definitely ignored the functions of the audit committee and standard requirement of financial report, as the company did not consolidate the accounting of subsidiary companies, which show the company totally violate the financial reporting standard procedure.
The board of directors must not allow themselves in a position where there is a conflict between the duties to the company and their own personal interests as a fiduciary. According to Ananda Raja, 2004, it is called a no-conflict rule that includes board of directors are required to disclose that potential conflict to the company and obtain the approval of the company if he continues to maintain his personal interests. According to Tricker 2013, conflict of interest arises if a director could benefit personally from a situation involving the company or from a decision taken by the board. A conflict can arise directly from a director's own interest or indirectly if a family member or close associate is involved. In relation with case studies, auditors and analysts of WorldCom were known to communicate indirectly through a game of nods and winks for the accounting irregularities that happened in the company. However, the friendly relationship between WorldCom management and Wall Street analysts leads to the unexpected conflict of interest in the company. It also involved the telecommunication analyst of Barney's company, Jack Grubman, when he started publicizing WorldCom, and any investor will be rewarded generously if they follow his buying recommendation until the stock reaches its high. Thus, this has a significant impact toward his financial and reputation. The executive of WorldCom that have a close relationship with Grubman certainly will be rewarded and also granted privileged allocation in initial public offering to Airbus, and CFO of the WorldCom, Scott Sullivan. Citigroup Bank, which provides the loans and credit for the purpose of attracting and rewarding corporate clients who are interested in the activity of merger and acquisition, which is one of the biggest interests of WorldCom. One of the timber companies that was heavily invested by Bernie Airbus received a loan of $134 million from Travelers Insurance, which is one of the Citigroup unit. According to the American Speech Language Hearing Association, ASHA 2018, when dealing with potential conflict of interest in the organization, two responses must be considered, which are disclosed and refused. In relation to the conflict of interest happened in WorldCom, executive of the company should refuse such offers made by Grubman, even though it matched with their personal preferences, as this shows to what extent they are able to apply and how the level of professionalism affects their judgment in making the decision. Act of disclosure is known for a self-initiated action, which is intended to be fully honest without hiding any facts for an act that may contradict with the ethical conduct applied in the company. When an act or relationship that could adversely influence the decision, it is best for an individual to refuse such action and withdraw from such situation that will raise the ethical action. An event that might need for a refusal action can be seen through the professional financial interest or personal relationship to one or more of the parties that are related in the organization.
Moving forward to Literature Review 2.4 regarding ethics and integrity. According to Khalida 2012, ethics can be described as a set of principles that contains behavioral codes to determine what is right or wrong. Mrs. Key and Troy 2006 stated that ethical responsibilities within the business world is not holistic but lies under a particular context of ethical behavior. It also outlines the moral duty and obligation that any human being should practice. Next, integrity, as stated in the Cadbury Report 1992, mentioned that integrity can be taken as meaning someone of high moral character who sticks to principle no matter the pressure to do otherwise. Board must consider their fiduciary duties whenever they speak for the company. Integrity means that holders of public office should not place themselves under any financial or other obligation to outside individuals or organizations that might influence them in terms of the performance of their official duties. Whistleblowing. Wesel 2019 stated that whistleblowing is an act to disclose the in-group wrongdoing to an external party in order to ensure the regulation and legal conduct has been followed by all members of the organization. According to Farrell 2016, a whistleblower is a person who voices an act or action to observe the wrongdoings and willingness to take the risk for such action, including loss of career opportunities and income. According to ICSA, whistleblower can be defined as a person who, usually an employee or anyone who reports and provides the information and evidence about the wrongdoings of a person or members of the company, in the case that they believe the related person has committed to an activity that brings a danger to public health or safety, injustice, financial malpractice, or breach of a law or regulation that has been set by the company. Whistleblowing protection information has been clearly stated in Whistleblower Act 2010 under Section 6, which any person has right to make a disclosure of improper conduct to any enforcement bodies as they believe that any members of the company, regardless the position that he holding, has engaged or is engaging or is preparing for the improper conduct. The Act also has stated that there is no prohibition by any written law to disclose such act to the enforcement agency. The importance of whistleblowing acts are able to help the organization to correct the wrongdoings and ethical breaches and able to avoid some costly procedure for the company to detect the malpractice in the business activities. Based on the case study, it is important to practice integrity and ethics on matters of company relation. Cynthia Cooper, who works as an internal auditor at WorldCom, the one that exposed the irregularities of the accounting practice which intended to deceive the investors of the company. The reason Cynthia and her colleagues started with the investigation when the number of peculiar financial transactions is suspicious and investigate such matters which, out of their assigned responsibilities, lead to the revelation of a series of clever manipulations intended to bury misallocated expenses and sham accounting entries. She worried that the revelation made by them would result in layoff and afraid of jumping into unwarranted conclusion. Despite that, she bravely continues to act as a whistleblower that voices out the wrongdoings and willingness by taking into consideration the risks that come along, such as being warned and fired by the upper management. By applying to the case study, it is clear that a company must practice honesty and create good culture in the organization in order to avoid ethical issues that might affect the growth of the company.
The first recommendation is that WorldCom need to strengthen and implement a firm corporate governance and corporate ethics to govern their top management and board of directors. Strengthening corporate governance and ethics here means WorldCom need to monitor and make sure the guidelines and best practice set up according to corporate governance standard comply without compromise. This is because the main factor of their failure is because of the loss or loophole of their corporate governance and ethics in managing the top management and the board of directors. This is because it can be said that they practice an autocratic leadership style of management in which the decision of control is made by one person and take a little expert opinion and input from others. An autocratic leader is not a good practice and unethical for public company, especially as they tend to make a decision based on their own belief and did not take any consideration, suggestion and advice from an expert. To strengthen and implement a corporate governance and ethics, WorldCom need to revise back their board of leadership and effectiveness, which comprise of board responsibilities, board composition, and remuneration. This is because in corporate governance and ethics, it clearly states what should be done and shouldn't be done in every roles and responsibility of the board of directors. This is why the board need to understand that every roles and responsibility held by them is very crucial and important to the company. Better understanding of their roles and function also may help enlighten them to make ethical decision making and know which is wrong and right. Understanding their job scope also help them to identify if there is any irregularity or suspicious decision making or action happen. There is indeed supervision and action taken, if any, to prevent fraud, abuse of power and malpractice. The effectiveness of corporate governance and ethics applied in the company can enhance the public image of the company. For example, in the WorldCom case, due to unethical behavior by the Chief Financial Officer, Scott Savilian, committed an improper accounting fraud. The second recommendation is to promote corporate ethical culture in the company. A company need to represent a good corporate ethical culture to show their commitment in being highly integrity, transparency, accountability, and responsibility in governing the management of the company. Ethical culture need to be practiced from all level management and need to be monitored by the board as a check and balance to protect the company from any dishonesty, fraud, misleading information, or irregularity. Besides, by having a firm corporate ethical culture, it promotes a workplace environment that make decisions based on ethics and eliminates conflict of interest by making the right move as well as to safeguard the company asset and resources. Furthermore, when making any business decision, ethics enhance accountability and transparency to make sure that all transactions involved are free from corruption, embezzlement, and sham. For example, when WorldCom is preparing their financial statement, they should follow the generally accepted accounting principle, standard accounting rules, and financial reporting and being transparent as the effect will prejudice the company performance, shareholder investment, and other stakeholder interests. The third recommendation is to establish effective code and policy. The code and policy include code of conduct and ethics for employee and whistleblowing policy. Code of conduct and ethics for employee is a set of rules written by the company for its employee to follow and act according to the rules. It is important to the company as it gives protection and inform company expectation towards employee. Meanwhile, whistleblower is an act of an employee giving information concerning wrongdoing after witnesses irregularity action in relating to work ethic and corporate governance. In improving the defense of the company, it is important to have whistleblower policy as a channel in conducting the process to manage actual or potential improper conduct. Besides, regulate a guideline how employees can raise their concern and give assurance that their identities are protected under Whistleblowing Act to make sure they can come in front without having fear or threat. Furthermore, the Board of Audit Committee that govern the whistleblower unit should be the member that did not have interest, relationship, and natural body. This is to make sure that the audit committee will not threaten or cause harm to the employee who report any irregularities in the company. Besides, they are the one who should investigate the trueness of the report and take the right action to stop any fraud or malpractice from negatively affecting the company. Code of conduct and whistleblowing need to be portrayed and applied in the company from all levels of management, especially by the top management, as they need to set a good example and model to their subordinate. Protection and credit should be given to the person who may report any misconduct or wrongdoing by the person related to the company, even though those actions might seem as interview or non-parker whistleblower with full evidence or any misconduct or wrongdoing should not be disclosed to the public as to protect their identity or become prey from the suspected person. In conclusion, corporate governance and ethics is important in every organization in helping the company to regulate risk and reduce the tendency for corruption. It acts as a direction and has power to control the company. Transparency and accountability should be the key elements in efficient and effective corporate governance and ethics. Fraud and scandal often occur due to director and senior management not complying and acting within the code of conduct context. An audit committee should put in place policy and procedure to aid in the safeguarding the external auditor independence and objectivity, taking into consideration relevant professional and regulatory requirements. In the WorldCom case, it can be perceived as if they apply good corporate governance and ethics, they might have sustained in the business until today. A corporate governance and ethics can deliver long-term success of the company. It adhere for effective management and distribution. Perhaps if WorldCom practice a good corporate governance and ethics system, it can be one of the world's largest telecommunication company that possess a good portfolio. However, due to lack of slum effort and awareness by the top management, paid scant attention to the details of operation, outright grade by the board of directors, and accounting abuse, it destroyed a possible great telecommunication legacy.